The reading this morning is by Anne Laura Lindbergh from The Gift from the Sea. She speaks of a time when she came down to the beach for a time. It's called Channel 12. Life today in America is based on the premise of ever-widening circles of contact and communications. It involves not only family demands, but community demands, national demands, international demands on the good citizen, through social and cultural pressures, through newspapers, magazines, radio programs, political drives, charitable appeals, and so on. My mind reels with it. What a circus act we women perform every day of our lives. It puts the trapeze artist to shame. Look at us. We run a tightrope daily, balancing a pile of books on the head, baby carriage, parasol, kitchen chair, still under control, steady now. This is not the life of simplicity, but the life of multiplicity that the wise men warn us of. It leads not to unification, but to fragmentation. It does not bring grace, it destroys the soul. And this is not only true of my life, I'm forced to conclude, it's the life of millions of women in America. I want, first of all, in fact, as an end to these other desires, to be at peace with myself. I want a singleness of eye, a purity of intention, a central core of my life that will enable me to carry out these obligations and activities as well as I can. I want, in fact, to borrow from the language of the saints, to live in grace as much of the time as possible. I'm not using this term in a strictly theological sense. By grace I mean an inner harmony, essentially spiritual, which can be translated into outward harmony. I'm seeking perhaps what Socrates asked for in the prayer from the Phaedrus when he said, "May the outward and inward man be at one." I would like to achieve a state of inner spiritual grace from which I could function and give as I was meant to in the eye of God. How difficult for us then to achieve a balance in the midst of these contradictory tensions, and yet how necessary for the proper functioning of our lives. How much we need and how arduous the attainment is, that steadiness preached in all the rules of holy living. How desirable and how distant is the ideal of the contemplative artist or saint, the inner inviolable core, the single eye. The problem is how to remain whole in the midst of the distractions of life, how to remain balanced no matter what centrifugal forces tend to pull one off center, how to remain strong no matter what shocks come in at the periphery and tend to crack the hub of the wheel. What is the answer? There is no easy answer, no complete answer. I have only clues, shells from the sea. The bare beauty of the Channel 12 tells me that one answer, and perhaps the first step, is in simplification of life, in cutting out some of the distractions. I must find a balance somewhere, or an alternating rhythm between these two extremes, a swinging of the pendulum between solitude and communion, between retreat and return. In my periods of retreat, perhaps I can learn something to carry back to my worldly life. I can at least practice for these 2 weeks the simplification of outward life as a beginning. I can follow this superficial clue and see where it leads. Here in beach living, I can try. Victor Carpenter, who has served our denomination as minister in Norwell, Arlington Street Church, Belmont, and as an interim in a number of congregations, including my own at Second Parish, where he was my predecessor, tells this story on himself in his book, Stations of the Spirit. A story about a young Unitarian Universalist minister who was settled in his first full-time church, Norwell, reflects the problem of trying to control all the outcomes in his life after he'd been there for about 2 years, he began to receive letters from other Unitarian Universalist churches expressing interest in him as a potential candidate for their pulpits. The young minister was flattered, yet indignant. He was happy in his parish, felt there was more work to be done there, and had no intention of leaving the church in which he was happily located. So he journeyed to denominational headquarters at 25 Beacon Street to ask why pulpit committees were contacting him. We thought that 2 years was long enough for you in the church which you're now serving. We thought you'd be interested in moving, he was told. By no means, said the young minister. I'm happy where I am. And then, in a fit of bravado to which only very young ministers have ready access, he added, the only church I would be interested in serving is the one located in Cape Town, South Africa. Sorry, said the spokesperson for the Department of Ministry, we have someone already committed to going there. Fine, said the young minister, then please don't put me on any more lists for at least a year or two, and he returned to his parish. A month later, the phone rang in the young minister's parsonage. The Department of Ministry was on the line. After being apprised that the person scheduled to go to South Africa had developed a physical condition that prevented his going, came the question, were you serious in your concerns to go? The young minister called out to the young minister's wife, dear, do we want to go to South Africa for 5 years? The young minister's wife replied, sure, why not? That was 1962. My wife, our 3-year-old son, and I went to South Africa. Bringing out much more forethought than I've conveyed here. It seemed the appropriate thing to do. We trusted the process that would carry us to South Africa, that would involve us in the profound currents and tides of that society and would change our lives in every conceivable way. Victor continues, use of words like currents and tides are appropriate in this context. Currents are associated with the flow of rivers and tides with the movements of the oceans. Our lives resemble the flow of rivers subject to currents and eddies. There's a timing, a tide in our being and in our relationships that we ignore at our peril. There's a flow and a movement of the human spirit. There's a natural unfolding of the initiatives of people. Even as we try, and some of us try very hard indeed, to cover every possible contingency, the plans of mice and men gang afterlay. The future comes with its own novelty and spontaneity. It outwits us with its newness and unpredictability. In order to deal with it, we need something better than a plan for all seasons. We need a deep confidence and a flexibility of the spirit that will enable us to trust the processes that carry our lives. Peace. Be still. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, you cannot step into the same river twice, for fresh waters are ever flowing in upon you. Heraclitus had it right. His contemporaries were more concerned about those things that never change. Truth, the good, ideal forms. While Heraclitus was one of the first to formulate what the science of atomic and subatomic particles tells us about the underlying nature of reality. Not only can't you step into the same river twice, you can't even breathe the same air twice. Change is the one constant of our lives. Not only is the river changing, but each of us is constantly changing as well. Many of the cells of our bodies are replaced over time at varying rates. For example, fat cells in our body are being replaced at the rate of about 10% each year. I just wish they weren't being replaced. And the molecules of the cells themselves are constantly changing. And of course, our life experience changes our personalities, our dispositions, our moods all the time. Change is a constant in our lives. And this constantly increasing, dizzying change all around us can easily consume us, make us feel as though we're being tossed all around by uncertainty, by anxiety, by fear. Peace. Be still. Anne Morrow Lindbergh, in our reading this morning, speaks of wanting to find peace with herself, a singleness of eye, a purity of intention, a central core to my life. And she believes she may be able to find it in the simplification of life. Our responsive reading this morning, taken from Walden by Henry David Thoreau, explains that he withdrew not to the beach but to the woods. And he explains the retreat in these words from Walden. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, to discover that I had not lived. Thoreau was seeking peace in his retreat. Peace. Be still. I'm not a very good Buddhist. I practiced with a meditation group, the Sangha, at Arlington Street Church when I served there as ministerial intern. But I haven't really had a regular Buddhist practice. A few years ago, our District Ministers Association at our retreat was led by one of our number who was also a teacher in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen teacher and anti-war activist. I found the meditations we did there freeing, and I was reminded of the value that I'd sometimes found in meditation. One of the practices we tried there was a walking meditation in which we went mindfully through the woods behind the retreat center, breathing in rhythm to our steps, walking in rhythm to our breath, breathing in, breathing out. And I was reminded of the pleasure I had taken in our walking meditation at Arlington Street, where we went through the public gardens just across the street from the church. All of these experiences have something ineffable about them, something hard to describe if you don't have the direct experience yourself. I know that a daily practice of meditation is, in some form, a good thing, and that when I do it, my days always go better. One part of my own practice is a simple form of breathing in, breathing out. Not a full-blown Zen practice, and not especially long, just a way to center myself and to clear my mind to start the day in stillness, in peace, free from the bustle and worry that inevitably comes over each of us as we start our day. I often awake with a dream of being late for a deadline. It happens especially on Sunday mornings. My own experience and the example of others make it clear that the Buddhist tradition is well worth understanding and considering as at least part of any of our spiritual paths. And the heart of Buddhism is practice, the experience of having a different relation with ourselves and the things around us, of actually abstracting ourselves for a time from attachment, which the Buddha teaches is the cause of dukkha, suffering. When we meditate, we're cultivating a different mode of experiencing ourselves. We're developing the ability to witness ourselves without being bound up in our egos. And the simplest form of meditation involves nothing more than breathing in, breathing out. 1 as we breathe in, 2 as we breathe out, 3, 4, up to 10, and then starting over at 1. Very quickly, the ego, what we might call the monkey mind, notices that we're encroaching on his preserves. 1, breathing in, 2, breathing out. You know, this is pretty boring. Lots of more productive things to do than breathing. Back to 1. Breathing in. 2. Breathing out. 3. Breathing in. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2. You know it's getting pretty late here. You better get to reading the paper if you're going to go off and do the rest of your chores for the day. Back to 1. Breathing in. My friend James Forbes, who's the minister in Providence, spoke to us this year at our retreat, and he said, you always just go back. Forgive yourself, whatever came up. Just go back to the beginning. Kind of like Ollie Ollie, all's in free. Back to 1. Breathing in, breathing out. The monkey mind is a real pain when we try to meditate, but in fact, he's always working every second of our lives, distracting us from where we are right here, right now, pulling us away from what we have toward what we want, from where we are to where we're going to be, from what we enjoy now to what we fear later. The practice of meditation enables us to tame that wildness within us, to calm ourselves so that we can be present right now, enjoying, giving thanks for what is now without trying to make it last forever or to rush on to the next thing. Peace. Be still. The prayer I spoke this morning is based on the Metta Sutta from the Pali, a record of the teachings of the Buddha, which was handed down by his disciples. Metta means loving kindness, and the prayer invites us to experience loving kindness for ourselves and then to spread it. So it starts with me in my condition, tossed about, distracted, subjected to constant and distressing change, to the constant speeding up of life around me, and not infrequently unhappy. First, I offer peace and happiness and ease of well-being to myself. After all, if I don't love myself, what sense is there in loving my neighbor as myself? But then as I become more comfortable in my own skin, my circle of concern expands beyond myself to the one next to me, to you. You, a neighbor, a friend, the person sitting next to you in the pew. We then expand to those who are not present, to they. They, who also need compassion and loving kindness. They, our relatives, whether living or not. They, the clerks in stores. And perhaps they, the people we distrust or dislike. And finally, we extend our compassion and our loving kindness to the breadths of our imagination. May all beings everywhere, known and unknown, near and far, be safe, happy, peaceful, and at ease. In this way, we move out of the preoccupation with ourselves, storm-tossed as we sometimes feel, and come to experience ourselves as being part of the whole, at one with all beings. One day I was driving toward downtown Hingham, and I got delayed, to my chagrin, at the stoplight at High Street. I was impatient to get where I was going. I was a little bit late. But I took a breath or two and calmed myself. And then I noticed that there was a beautiful purple bush in bloom at the southwest corner of the intersection. I took a breath in, a breath out. I admired it in the moment. The light changed. I got where I needed to go. But it seemed less of a chore to get there and more of an adventure, an opportunity to notice. So as we breathe mindfully in this way, we practice cessation, no thing. And when we're not meditating, the practice gives us a new perspective to apply. When we're angry or sad, lonely or depressed, we can recognize all of these as dukkha, suffering. And we can recognize them as a consequence of our own monkey mind's response to the very real but passing events or provocations or disappointments that have brought about these states within us. The whole question is not what happens to me, but how I respond. If I respond in anger to anger, I'll simply cause the escalation of that anger. As the Buddha says, hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by love. This is an ancient and unalterable law. I'm not a very good Buddhist. I tend more to Christian and Jewish practices and traditions. But whenever I begin my own prayer practice, I always start with the simple exercise of breathing in, breathing out to clear my mind and to move to the present moment, and then to move into gratitude. There's nothing alien to Jewish or Christian practice in Buddhist meditation. Indeed, the very strong focus on practice provides a clear, compelling pattern that's easy to follow and easy to continue. And in that way, I've often benefited from opportunities to meditate in the Buddhist manner and in the pieces I've managed to incorporate into my own practice. Change is everywhere. Change will not stop. Change will not slow down. Change will disrupt our lives. But in the midst of all the heaving seas around us, there's also the possibility of peace, of calm, of a singleness of eye, a purity of intention, a central core in my life, as Anne Maura Lindbergh puts it. We can find that deep confidence and flexibility of the spirit that will enable us to trust the processes that carry our lives. That faith in which Victor Carpenter and his family trusted as he and they set out to Cape Town. We each find our own way to that peace. Perhaps we withdraw to pray. Perhaps we engage in the deliberate calming that is given by meditation. Or perhaps we open ourselves to the natural world around us, to channeled wealth, the ocean, the woods. Mary Oliver speaks of that retreat in her poem, A Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who's flung herself out of the grass, the one who's eating sugar out of my hand, who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? May we find peace even in the midst of all the storms that surround us. Peace. Be still. Amen.